This content is not suitable for children and may contain depictions of violence.
Hi everyone, grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. Welcome to True Crime Island. If you're new to the island, I'm Cambo and I'm the creator and host of True Crime Island, the audio podcast. I presented over 100 cases there and this is the first video episode, so sit back and enjoy. Being the first show, I'm sure things will evolve over the next few episodes until I get it all sorted out. So let's get stuck into it. Tonight, I will tell you about a case that I recently saw on Forensic Files. Forensic Files, if you haven't seen it, is a great true crime series focusing on the forensic aspect of crime solving. It's an older show, but a classic true crime series. Now tonight, I'll be referencing news articles from the Marshall News Messenger, Austin American Statesman, the Desert Sun, Forensic Files, of course, the Texas Tribune, the Hill Country News, and a little bit I found in a book called Forensic Victimology by Brent E. Turvey. Okay, so tonight we go to Deer Creek Lane, Leander, Texas, 2004, where office receptionist 21-year-old Molly Kathleen Daniels, born on the 13th of February 1983, and 24-year-old unemployed mechanic Clayton Wayne Daniels, well, he was born on the 14th of February 1981. Hey, Valentine's Day. They lived there with their two kids, 4-year-old Caleb and 1-year-old Haley Joe. Clayton is known to be a bit of a layabout, and that's probably why he's unemployed. But that isn't the worst thing about him. He's also a pedo. Now we get to the 18th of June 2004. Passers-by notice fire coming from over the edge of a roadway down a long, steep ravine at Ranch to Market Road, number 1174, Burnett County. On closer inspection, they see that it's a car that's gone over the edge and it's on fire. Emergency services are called, and by the time they're on the scene, the car's totally engulfed in flames. The fire is so intense that the tyres have melted into the rocks surrounding the vehicle. Inside the car are the charred remains of the driver who's been burnt beyond recognition. There are no fingers or toes and the head is also completely burnt away. Police identify the vehicle as a green 1999 Chevy Cavalier registered to Molly and Clay Daniels, who reside in Leander, Texas. They collect some personal effects in and around the car, including the remains of tennis shoes, a baseball cap with a Harley Davidson pin and fishhook attached, and a silver necklace. A driver's license in the name of Clayton Wayne Daniels is also found. They contact Molly Daniels and she confirms that her husband Clay has not returned in the car and she's asked to help identify the body. When shown the personal effects, Molly confirms that they belong to her husband Clay. Police note that she's unduly calm for having just found out that her spouse and father of her two children has just perished in such a horrific way. For Molly, times are going to be tough. With two young kids to take care of on her receptionist wages, she's lucky there's a $110,000 insurance policy on her now burnt husband. At her work at a gutter factory, the co-workers get together and raise over $1,000 to help her out. Now, isn't that such a lovely thing? People can be so kind. It's great when the community can get together to help those in need. Also, Molly puts out a flyer around town asking for help. Now, I don't have the flyer to read out exactly, but it went something to this effect. Grieving widow requires babysitting help for two young children. She gets a response and a neighbour offers her babysitting for two kids at $120 per week, which is apparently a fraction of the normal cost. Also, people brought her groceries and things for the kids just to help out this poor, grieving widow. Again, amazing when the community wants to help those out in dire need. The charred remains were taken for an autopsy, as they do. In his autopsy report, former Deputy Medical Examiner Vladimir Perungau identified the remains of those of Clayton Wayne Daniels, noting that he'd found a small segment of penis and a small amount of urine in the bladder that matched to Daniels. I don't know how he matched it to Daniels, but that's what it was written. There was only 14 pound or 7 kilo of body mass left. Police at the scene of the accident noticed that there's no skid marks at the edge of the road going down towards the ravine. That would be fine, but what didn't make sense is that if the driver didn't apply the brakes, then it should have run over the edge at reasonably high speed. But the damage that the car had, plus the damage made to the surroundings as it passed, looked more like it went down the ravine at a very slow speed or just rolled into the ravine rather than at a normal driving speed given the lack of skid marks. This raised their suspicions that not all was as it seemed. Further forensic examination of the car revealed that the driver's seat had been totally burnt out and no residual body fluids were found. Also, the fuel tank was totally intact. Mechanically, the car had been in top shape before the accident. The brakes were fine, fuel lines, suspension, engine. In fact, mechanical failure of the car was ruled out as a cause for the crash or the fire. No point of ignition of the fire was able to be found. So how did it burn so completely? Investigators decided to take samples from the vehicle and test for accelerants. This would come back testing positive for charcoal fire starter fluid. At this stage, police were very suspicious. Did someone kill Clay Daniels and try to cover it up by burning him in the car? Who wanted him dead? Well, as we know, Islanders, the first place to look at is the spouse. Investigators found that there was a $110,000 insurance policy on the life of Clay Daniels. Could his wife have killed him, put his corpse in the car, pushed it over the ravine and torched it? If she had an issue with him that she would like him permanently gone, it was pretty much backed up by one of his best friends at his memorial service, and this best friend called him an asshole. I mean, wow. Now, as things seemed suspicious, a DNA test was performed on the charred remains. Usually, they're able to take a DNA sample from the teeth, but there were none to use. So a mitochondrial DNA test was performed from the part of the hip bone that remained. Now, this test will result in getting the matrilineal DNA sequence, which is passed down from the mother unchanged in both males and females. They would also test Clay's mum and then compare the samples. Problem is that in this instance, the testing would take 6 months or so. Then one day a strange thing happened. Molly's sister was visiting and she happened to go into the master bedroom. She was shocked to see a man curled up in a t-shirt and boxers inside the closet. She ran to tell Molly, and when they returned, there was no one there. Now that's pretty weird. Then, just a few weeks after the terrible accident, Molly gets a new boyfriend. I mean, that's pretty quick. His name is Jake Alexander Gregg. He looks like a bit like Clay, but he has black hair. Well, look, I guess people have their type, I suppose. So she found someone who looked like Clay. Anyway, he looked like Clay so much that when Caleb, Molly's 4-year-old son, was introduced to him, he said, "Daddy, are you back?" Police soon put Molly under surveillance as the forensic evidence for the accident scene and the car just didn't add up at all. Neighbours noticed that this Jake Gregg guy wouldn't interact with them at all, and even when they said hello, he'd just sort of shy away. In fact, he would usually stay in the car when they get home from going out. Molly would get out of the car, open the garage door, drive the car in, and he would get out of the car and enter the house from inside the garage. He was rarely seen outside. Now, as the police were doing surveillance, Molly seemed to be going about her days as normal. Nothing seemed unusual or out of place. Then one day, they saw her and her new boyfriend Jake get in the car and go out. Police followed them to a Taco Bell where the couple ate lunch inside. The officer entered the restaurant and walked up to get a closer look at this Jake character. To his surprise, it looked just like the apparently dead Clayton Daniels, except he's got his hair dyed black. The officer asked for ID and Jake produced a Texas driver's license with the name Jake Gregg. Not satisfied that he was who he said he was, both Molly and Jake were taken downtown for questioning. At first, Jake denied that he was Clayton Daniels, but soon he did admit that he was. Okay, so if he's Clayton Daniels, who the fuck was the body in the car? I mean, what the fuck's going on? Anyway, this is where it starts to become a truly twisted tale. We have to go back a while. You see, Clayton was a pedo. Before he staged the accident, he'd done a plea deal for a historic rape on his 7-year-old cousin back in 1977 when he was 16 years old. So once the plea deal was made, he was released and he had to turn up 30 days later to serve his sentence. What was his sentence? 30 days with 10 years probation. 30 days. Now, before we fly into a Cambo rage over this sentence, this is the explanation from the comments section of one of the newspapers I mentioned before. Here we go. Initially, he took a plea bargain for the sexual assault charge. Because the victim's parents did not want to put their daughter through the agony of a trial and the evidence against him was mostly circumstantial, he agreed to 10 years probation. However, if he violated his probation in the slightest, he would have to serve a 20-year sentence in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice System per that plea bargain. The 30 days he was sentenced to was for a prior probation violation. The reason I know all of this is because I was the young victim. So, this sentence was agreed upon with the victim and her family. Probably knowing Clayton was such a scumbag, he would easily violate his probation and end up inside for the 20 years. So one of the reasons he tried to fake his death was so he didn't have to go inside for those 30 days. He faked his death just 3 days before he had to go inside. Also, Clayton said he wanted to avoid being put on the register of sexual offenders list. He could hit reset on his life, collect the $110,000 life insurance to start all over again, although he denied that the money was his motive for the crime. Molly, she told investigators that she had no fucking idea that Clayton faked his own death until he turned up at her house about a month after the accident. At this stage, the DNA test on the corpse wasn't finalised, so they had no idea who it was. Of course, they'd gone through missing person lists and all this without success. They would have to wait for the DNA results. Now, Molly told investigators that when Clayton turned up, they decided they would go to Mexico where Clayton would get new teeth and plastic surgery and she would get a tummy tuck, as you do. While on remand in jail, Clayton, though, he opened his mouth. He told one of his cellmates that the actual plan was to dig up the corpse of someone old who'd recently been buried, someone old with few relatives, and that would lessen any impact on that corpse's family. When investigators were informed of this, they eventually found a cemetery that had an area set aside for people with little or no money, and that's where they could get buried. They eventually came across a grave at Pebble Mound Cemetery that had been recently disturbed. It was the grave of Charlotte Davis, 81, who died Saturday the 20th of December 2003, about 6 months before the staged accident. Investigators exhumed the coffin and their worst fears were realised. The coffin was empty. Investigators now got a search warrant for access to Molly's work computer, to check out her browser history. Well, Molly was sticking to her story that she was innocent. Clay wasn't saying too much either. Now, by just some stroke of luck, Molly's computer had become infected with a keylogging virus or worm. Now what these keyloggers do is they log every keystroke you make on the computer keyboard and save it as a text file. This way the person infecting your PC can see what you type, especially username and passwords. Well, what they found would incriminate Molly and prove she had helped plan the faking of Clayton's death all along. Here are some of the search terms that were found in the keylog. Unidentified body, forensics on a body, burned body, no body left after the fire accident, fire's death by fire with no body, body burned so badly it's unidentifiable, vehicle fire with no body left, vehicle fires involving corpses, when are teeth destroyed by fire, cremation, 15 hours at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the keylogger also showed how Molly had researched not only how to fake Clayton's death by fire, but also how he could get a fake birth certificate and Texas driver's license. Oh dear Molly. In a further search of the Daniels home, investigators found 2 containers of charcoal starter fluid in the kitchen, with one matching the type used to burn the car. When the DNA test came back, it was found to not match Clayton Daniels at all. Yep, it was poor old Charlotte Davis. Okay, so maybe now you're asking, wasn't there an autopsy performed that found the corpse to be male because they found this little piece of penis and the bladder contents matched that of Clayton? Well, this is from Forensic Victimology by Brent E. Turvey. I did read a bit out before, but I'll read the bit before it. Examiner's office misidentified the charred remains of an 81-year-old woman as those of a 23-year-old man. In his autopsy report, former Deputy Medical Examiner Vladimir Parangau identified the remains as those of Clayton Wayne Daniels, noting that he'd found a small segment of penis and a small amount of urine in the bladder that matched to Daniels. Unfortunately, the corpse was that of an already dead and embalmed, buried and then exhumed woman, leaving Burnett County officials wondering if they'd actually examined the body at all. So at Molly's trial, she ended up confessing to be the brains of the operation, more like shit for brains, and that she had researched how to burn the corpse they'd used beyond recognition. She told the court how Clayton would dig up the 6-month-old corpse of Charlotte Davis, dress her in tennis shoes, faded glory jeans, whatever the fuck they are. Actually, I did Google it and they're Walmart jeans. They threw in a Harley Davidson cap with a fish hook next to the car, which Molly would tell police Clayton was wearing the last time she saw him. They would go to place Charlotte in the car, push it over the edge of a ravine, then use the charcoal starter fluid to set fire to the car. Molly said she would then wait for police to contact her once the burning wreck was discovered. She did try to say that they did it to keep the family together, as Clayton was due to serve 30 days in jail and they didn't want him to go on the registered sex offenders list. She did deny that it was done for the insurance money. Yeah, right, Molly. Molly said they got the idea from watching Law and Order and CSI. I mean, for fuck's sake, maybe she should have watched the whole show all the way through. Clayton confessed to arson and insurance fraud. For insurance fraud, he got 20 years. For the aggravated sexual assault on the child, 20 years. Indecency with a child, 20 years. Arson, 15 years. Desecration of a cemetery, 10 years. Now, his projected release date is in 2034. Molly confessed to insurance fraud and hindering apprehension. For the hindering apprehension, she got 10 years. For the insurance fraud, 20 years. She served at least 12 years of her sentence and exited prison sometime after 2016. Now, she's keeping a very low profile. So, Islanders, this case had so many twists. First, it looks like a father of two has run off the road and been incinerated in his car. Then it looks like the scene is staged. So why would someone want to kill Clayton Daniels? Then it's not Clayton, but someone else. So who is it? And were they murdered? By who? And for what? Then we find out no one was murdered at all. because the body in the car was a dug-up corpse. Now, the autopsy, if it was performed at all, found that small piece of penis and so declared it to be the body of a 24-year-old man, but actually it's a long dead, buried and embalmed 81-year-old woman. Now, just by luck, Molly's computer had been infected by that keylogger virus, and so her part in all of this was brought to light. Now, I'd hate to think how this has affected 4-year-old Caleb and 1-year-old Haley Joe. Look, probably she's too young to realise or remember what happened. Still, she would have been 13 by the time her mum got out of prison, and her dad is still inside. Now, the community felt betrayed in all of this as well, as they'd come together to help out the grieving widow. Her workplace closed for the day to attend Clayton's memorial. They raised over $1,000 or more to help her out. And neighbours brought her food and groceries, and that neighbour, Jennifer Panis, said that she offered to help babysit the kids when she saw the flyer about a newly widowed mum needing a babysitter. She offered her services to mind the 2 kids for only $120 a week, which was a huge discount from the normal rate. Now, Molly was lapping all this up. She probably loved all the attention she was getting. So I guess the only good thing is that they didn't actually murder anyone to pull off their little stunt. Also, Clayton ended up having to do the 20 years for raping his 7-year-old cousin rather than the 30 days. Molly got busted for being a conniving, lying bitch. Fuck's sake, what's wrong with people? Well, what I guess is stupid people do stupid things and win stupid prizes. Now, let's hope little Caleb and Haley Joe didn't turn out like their parents. So what do you think, Islanders? Leave your comments below. Now, thanks for watching this first video episode. If you're new to the island, you can check out my 100+ cases on my website, which is www.truecrimeisland.com. You can go to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I will redo some of those cases here, so hit like and subscribe if you want. Remember, this is my first video episode. It can only get better. So again, thanks for watching. As I always say, don't forget to delete your browser history. Good night. Boom fuckalunga.